So let me start that. All right, so just to recap, we're going to do coding from scratch in a very tiny nutshell from beginning to end, covering key concepts from all of the lessons.
So they are trying to transfer you to somebody?
No, they're transferring me to.
All right, so here we go. So what I'm going to start off with is kind of from the end where we're going over source control in the terminal. So by the end of the course, you should have a GitHub account. And what you want to do whenever you start a new project is you want to start a new GitHub repository. One way you can do that is by logging into your GitHub account at github.com, and you're going to hit this plus button right here. Then you're going to go ahead and click New Repository. And your repository name is going to be the name of your project folder, your project. So I'm going to call this May 14th Workshop. And I'll have a short description, workshop, covering lessons in CSS. And then we're going to make it public. And then I'm going to initialize this repository with a README. Basically, a README file is a markdown file where you kind of have a description of what your project is. It's just a text file. So then I'm going to go ahead and create repository. I'm going to hit this green button. And I have that repository made. And now I'm going to go ahead and clone the repository. So basically what I'm doing is I'm making a copy of it so I can have it on my local computer. So I click this green button, clone or download, and then I'm going to hit this clipboard icon so I can copy this HTTPS URL. And then what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and go to my terminal. And clear this for a second. So whenever you open your terminal or command prompt, it's going to take you to the beginning of your computer after you've selected the username. So it is the username Cassandra Matos. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the place where I want to clone the repository, where I want to put this project. So I'm going to go ahead and change the directory into my desktop. You can see here I am now in my desktop. And this is where I want to go ahead and put my repository. I'm not saying you have to put it on your desktop, but just for the purpose of this workshop, that's where I'm going to put this project. So I can type in git clone, and then I'm just going to paste that URL that I took from GitHub. And it has now cloned the repository. So if I go to my desktop over here, we can see that the repository is here. So now it is now on my local computer. So now I'm going to go ahead and create some files in this project folder. So in order to do that, I need to change directory again into that project folder. And now I'm going to go ahead and create those files. So touch, index.html, style.css, and script.js. Okay, so touch is the command to create a file, and then these are the file names, and they're separated by space, so now it knows that there are 3 separate files. So if I were to go to my desktop again, you can see that they're all here. So I have created some files. This is probably a point in time where I want to commit something onto my GitHub. So one way we show you in the curriculum is through GitKraken. I'm going to show you how to do it through the terminal. So we are in the folder, and now I'm going to type in git status. And what that tells me is on the current branch that I'm in, which is the origin master branch, it says that there are 3 files that have nothing added to commit. So basically what that means is I've made changes to these 3 files and I haven't made that save point. I haven't created a commit So I'm going to git add A, which means I'm getting all of them ready. I'm staging all of these files for a commit. And now I can git commit -m, and then in the quotations is the note that I want to make in the commit. So I'm going to say created starter files. Okay, and now it says 3 files changed, and I have created a commit on all of these files. Okay, so now I want, well, before I continue, are there any questions? All right, I'll keep going. If you don't know the commands quite yet, if you're not there in the material, don't worry, you will go through the commands, do some exercises, but I just kind of want to show you how everything flows together. But if you do have a question on any of the commands, feel free to ask as well. All right, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up this folder in my text editor so I can actually add some code to these files. So I'm going to back up from my current directory. So I'm going to do cd ... which means I'm just going to go one step backward. So right now we're in May 14 workshop, and I hit that, and now I'm in the desktop. So now I'm back in the desktop directory, and now I want to open my project folder with my text editor. So I use Visual Studio Code, so it has the command code, and then I just write the directory I want to open. So that's May 14th workshop. And it opens up my Visual Studio right here. Okay, so now I can go ahead and write some code. So let's say in my HTML, I'm going to go ahead and have a skeleton here. And I'm going to change the title to May 14th workshop. And let's say I have a form here. So let's say I have an H1. Please enter your name in the form below. And then I'm just going to have form and let's have an input, given an ID of first name. Let's give it a placeholder of, give it a type as well of text. And we can put a label in here. I'm just going to move this closing label tag outside of the input because I am nesting the input tag inside of this label tag. Now I'm going to do the same thing for last name. Okay, so now I have created a form and there are 2 labels, first name, last name, and then I have 2 inputs, type text. They each have their own ID, first name, last name, and they have some placeholders in there. And then I'm going to go ahead and put a button here, and I will just say click me for now. We'll figure out what this button's going to do later. So now I've added some code into my HTML, right? I've created a skeleton. I have an H1 tag. I have a heading that says enter your name in the form below. I have a form with the first and last name, and then I have a button. So this is also a good point where maybe I want to commit something, right? I have made a change and I want to save this. So what I can do, instead of having to go back and forth between the terminal screen and Visual Studio screen, you can actually open up the terminal in Visual Studio. all you have to do is hit Control tilde, and it opens up right here. So now I can get an A. Well, actually, let's do get status. Okay, it tells me I've modified the index.html. So I'm going to do git add. Let's say put in form. I'll put created form here as my commit. All right, so I have committed that now. So any questions so far on terminal, source control, any of the HTML that I wrote? All right, so I'm going to go ahead and open this in a browser, see what we have so far. And this is kind of what we're working with right now. So I'm going to insert a break tag because I want this to be on a separate line. So here I'll just do BR. So I have that break tag. And there. And then I'm going to commit that as well because I'm going to jump into CSS next. So I will get an A and get modified form. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and add some CSS to my HTML. I'm going to use the split editor so I can see both of the files at the same time. Oops. That one. All right. So now I have the HTML file and the CSS file together. In order for them to work together, I need to link the two files together. So what I do is I put a link tag here in between my head tag, so in between the opening and closing tag in my HTML file. Let it know what the relation is, which is style sheet. Then I say what type of file it is. It's a text file, but more specifically CSS. And I let it know where it's at. So href equals style.css. Now the reason I can put the file name directly is because the file is sitting directly under the project folder. So it is a relative location with the starting point being the project directory. All right, so now I have linked my CSS file to my HTML file, and now I'm going to go ahead and add some styling. I'll do something pretty simple here. We're going to target the body tag, and I'm going to give it a background color of black, and then I'll give it a font color of white, and we'll give it a font family. Let's do Georgia, and that is good. And then just for fun, we'll change the H1. We'll target the H1 tag and we'll make that color, let's say tomato. That's a fun color. Let's go ahead and do tomato. Okay, so we're going to save that. So now I've made some changes into my CSS. This is another place where I want to create a commit. So I'm going to get status. Okay, I see the index.html and the style.css have been modified. So I am now going to get add. I'm going to get these ready, stage these files. Now I'm going to create a commit and say linked CSS and added styling. Okay. So now I can go back to my browser here and see the changes that I've made. So these, I added some styling, I did some CSS. Are there any questions on the CSS I wrote? How I targeted the body, how I wrote these properties, how I linked the files together, anything of that nature, or anything I've covered so far? I know it's a lot at once. So if there are any questions at all, please don't be afraid to ask.
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
On your HTML, what does the label button do on the on the form again?
Label just creates a label for the input.
Oh, okay.
So this right here is just letting it know it is a label for an input.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome.
Yeah, no problem. Are there any other questions? All right, so we'll keep going and now jump into some JavaScript. So I'm going to go ahead and open our JavaScript file here. And I'm first going to link my JavaScript to my HTML. So at the end of our body, so right before the closing body tag, we're going to put our script tag and we are going to let it know where it's at using the source attribute, script.js. And again, same reason as the CSS that I was able to write just the file name is that it's sitting directly under the project folder. So go ahead and save that. So now my JavaScript and HTML files are now linked. So whatever I write in here will now be connected to my HTML. So we have a form that collects a first name and last name. Let's say when the person clicks the button, it says hello, their first name, last name. So first things first, I need the button to actually do something when it's being clicked. So I'm going to add the attribute onClick. And I'm going to set it equal to the function name that is going to be triggered when that button is clicked. So I'm going to call it greeting. And here, I'm going to go ahead and create that function in my JavaScript file. So function greeting. It requires no parameters, so that's why we don't have anything inside of that parentheses. Have our curly brackets. And now, in order to get this working, we need some bits of information, right? We're going to spit out to the DOM, hello, first name and last name. So we need to collect first name and last name. So I'm going to create a variable first, which is going to grab the element where the first name is in. So that's going to be document.getElementById. And note, these inputs have an ID of first name. So we're going to grab this entire element by that ID. So in here, I'm going to put in first name. Okay. And what this does is it grabs the entire element. So that means this entire input element, the entire HTML element. I don't want the entire HTML element. I just want what's inside of there. What did the user type in that box? So I will grab the value of that element. So we do dot value. Oops. Dot value. Going to do the same thing for last name. So create a variable. It's going to look almost exactly the same, except we're going to change the ID. Last name. Dot value. And just for fun, I'm going to go ahead and create a variable greeting. And it is going to equal hi plus first plus, oops, plus a space plus last. And what this is going to equal is hi with a space, whatever that first name is, with a space after that, and then whatever that last name is. If I don't put this plus space in here, first and last name are going to be right next to each other, and there's not going to be one space, so it's going to read as if it's one word. So the last thing we want to do is we want to put this greeting out somewhere. In order to put that greeting out somewhere, I need to have a place in my HTML to put that greeting. So I'm going to go back to my HTML code and create a, let's say, H3 tag. And I'm going to give it the ID of hello. And there's nothing going to be inside of that tag. It's just, this is the element that we're going to grab in order to put that greeting in there. So we're going to go back to our JavaScript, and I'm going to grab that element first. So get element by ID. The ID is hello. And I want to grab the inner HTML of this element. So I'm going to do dot inner HTML. Now, if you don't remember what inner HTML is, it's basically that text that is in between the opening and closing tag. So for example, in line 12 here, this H1 element, the inner HTML of this H1 element is please enter your name in the form below. The inner HTML of this title tag is May 14th workshop. The inner HTML of this H3 tag is null, right? There's nothing there. So what we're going to do is we're going to set that equal to something, which what we're setting that equal to is going to be our greeting. Okay, so now we can save that, and this is probably a good place to put another commit, right? We've made another change to our project, and we're going to go ahead and save that step. So I'm going to git status, see my index and script have changed, and I am going to git A, and then git commit, and let's say added greeting function. All right, so let's go ahead and test this out, make sure it works. And it works. So now we have our HTML, we have our CSS, and we have our JavaScript. Are there any questions on the JavaScript that I wrote? All right, so if there are no questions, we're going to go ahead and do the finale here. We are going to push our commits onto GitHub. So right now, as it stands, if I go to GitHub and I refresh this, there's nothing there. I still just have this README file, but none of those changes have been made. I have to push these commits or save points, however you want to think of them, back into GitHub. So in order to do that, I'm going to do git push -u space origin master. All right, so that has completed. So now if I go back here and I refresh, I have all my files and I have my commits, and you can see here it will show the last commit on that file and when it was done. So you can see, and then you can go ahead and click and look at your code as well. So that is kind of CFS in a very small nutshell. Key concepts there are, you want to make sure that every time you start, I want you to get in the habit of every time you start a project, no matter how big or small it is, you go ahead and create a Git repo for it. Kind of follow the exact same steps that I was doing, and get in the habit of creating those commits and getting familiar with GitHub and creating those save points so that, you know, every significant change, you're making a commit on that. So if anything ever goes wrong, you can go back a step, and it's not going to be that big of a step to where you're going to have to redo a lot of code. But
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I'm new to this whole thing, and I'm going through the chapters, and every chapter kind of things get introduced as simple and then blossom into more complex. You're obviously really fluent in this. How long it took you to kind of understand the commands? I mean, what's the trick? There's got to be a trick to this. What did you do to make it simpler on yourself?
I did a lot of reading of documentation, and it's honestly a lot of practice, and it's a lot of errors is really how you really get good at it. Is
make the mistakes left and right. I'm not kidding. I feel like an idiot. I go to simple and I go to it and I'm like, what am I missing?
No, that's part of the process. We all go through it. I still go through it every time I learn something new. It's you can't be scared of the errors or get angry with the errors. You have to look at errors as a learning opportunity, because those errors are going to be errors that you see again, but you're going to be quicker in knowing what's wrong. Because it's hard to remember where everything goes, like the exact syntax for everything. I have to look up things every day, all the time. So it's just a matter of practice and being comfortable being uncomfortable.
Uncomfortably.
Right. And just whenever you see an error, just research it, look it up. Ask me, ask your mentor, ask your peers. Debugging is the most important part of this process, and being able to understand what you wrote and understand what those errors are saying to you. Because when you do get an error, it's telling you what's wrong with the code. It's just, there's just a little bit of translation that you have to do in order to really understand. And all that is just, come to these workshops, come to my office hours, ask me any questions, but don't be afraid and don't feel like you're dumb or anything.
I don't know about you, the rest of the people in the group. This is my first workshop, so I didn't even know how everything works out. So, but it's like I'm making a lot of mistakes. So I got nervous, and I'm like, okay, I got to do something about it. I saw here that you can actually record this event, so we can kind of go back in time to see what you taught us. I didn't do that. Would you mind sending me the link, or do you have any old link to go ahead to
these workshops are all recorded. Under your announcements where it says workshops, there's a link that says click here for recorded workshops. So by the end of the day, this one will be posted, but you can go now and see all of the older ones as well. So you have direct access to that.
Fingers crossed.
Reach out if you have any questions.
Thank you. Will do.
Awesome. Are there any other questions? Anybody else? All right. Well, I do want to thank you all for coming today. Again, this will be recorded and posted. Oh, I believe there's one chat. Oh, I did go question here. The difference between innerHTML and value. So innerHTML is going to be that text that's in between the opening and closing tag here. So this is like innerHTML here, innerHTML. That pertains to the actual HTML code. .value means the value of that element. So that could be the text that's written inside of this box here, right? What I write here in this box is not what I wrote in the code. It's not pertains to the actual HTML code. Also, you could have different values for like different inputs. So let's say you had like radio inputs with multiple choice questions, right? And it has some text in there. So that text could be the value of that element. So that's kind of the difference there. Does that answer your question? Does that kind of clear things up? All right. Are there any other questions before I go ahead and shut this down?
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Bye-bye.
You guys.
You too. Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.